What's up everyone, it's Mike, and welcome to my first ranking video of the year. Today, I'm going to rank all the movies that I saw in theaters in the year 2023. This will hopefully be a part one of a series of videos where I review movies that I saw in theaters, starting with the 2000s. Hopefully this will catch on and you find what I have to talk about quite interesting. So, I saw a total of 16 movies this year, and I will be ranking them all from worst to best, as most content creators do these days. I figured I won't tell you which films I saw this year at the start of the video because I like to surprise people. And if you don't see movies on this list that I didn't see in theaters, don't ask me why I didn't see them. That is none of your business.
You want to know why? It's mind your own business, that's why!
Also, I'm not including streaming service movies, obviously, but I thought I should share two honorable mentions. Now, You People is one of the worst movies I've seen all year. The writing is bad, the jokes aren't funny, and the characters are just unlikable. On top of that, this movie is an all-out cringe fest, which was to be expected in a movie called You People that doesn't even have a You People joke throughout the whole thing. This movie would be at the bottom of the list if I were ranking it among the theater kids. And as for No One Will Save You, this movie's just fine. I like the premise and even the lead actress is great. It's just, this feels less like a big studio movie for a streaming service and more like a short film that you'd see on Dust or Alter's YouTube channel. I also feel like they could have done more with the aliens' design, which just looks so generic. I mean, the aliens from War of the Worlds looked a lot better than this. At least make them look more monstrous? I don't know. Make the aliens a shape-shifting goo or something. Like, do they realize what they could have done? But yeah, this movie's mid. Now that those are out of the way, let's all go to the movies. These are all the movies that I saw in theaters in 2023, ranked from worst to best. It's Nicolas Cage as a vampire. Wow, I've never seen that before.
I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!
But he's not just any vampire. In this movie, he's Count Dracula. Yeah, this movie sucks. So basically the story revolves around Renfield, Dracula's human servant, or familiar, who is trying to escape his abusive, narcissistic boss. He goes to a support group, he rents an apartment, he dates Aquafina, who in this movie is a cop with a tragic backstory, and they meet during a shootout at a bar where he saves her life. At least she's not a rapping seagull in this movie.
The gossip, the buzz, the who said what, who does that.
Also, Ben Schwartz is in this, and he's this crime boss that eventually becomes one of Dracula's familiars that Renfield has to fight. As if Dracula wasn't already enough of a threat for Renfield. This movie tries to be appealing by putting Dracula and of course Renfield in a modern day setting, and it just doesn't work for me. In fact, nothing about this movie works for me. There's one scene where Dracula comes in and kills all of Renfield's friends in his support group, and at the end Renfield revives them all with Dracula's super blood. I guess there had to be one ridiculous film I saw this year, so let's move on, shall we? Yeah, Quantumania sucks. I could make a whole video on why this movie in particular is bad, but literally everyone else has expressed their thoughts better than I ever could, so I'll keep mine brief since we have other movies to talk about. On one hand, the story sounds interesting, but the execution is off. The visuals are ugly looking and not that amazing to look at. Don't even get me started on MODOK. I guess it's the infamous Marvel fatigue that makes me feel this way, and that may be true. I'd argue that there are better ways of making this film more visually appealing. On the other hand, the film's villain, Kang, seems like the wrong main antagonist for this movie. I'm not sure who would have been a better foe for Ant-Man to fight in this movie, but it was clear that they set up Kang as the next big threat, the next Thanos, if you will, that the Avengers have to fight, since his introduction to the MCU in Loki. But then again, maybe he was the right foe for Ant-Man to fight in this movie. At least that's maybe what the producers thought, because based on the theme of this movie, Kang having connections to the multiverse would give him different variations of the character, or variants as they like to call it, opening the doors for multiple actors to play multiple versions of the character. Instead, they chose to have the same actor play all the variants of Kang like this wouldn't ruin the future of the MCU. But he just had to go and get Me Too'd, huh? Anyways, moving on. So I saw this movie at a film festival in my hometown that I went to this year, and I knew I should have stayed home because this movie is so boring. I mean, it's better than two other movies I saw in theaters. The premise is very indie Oscar bait. Michael Cera plays this gambling addict who visits his hometown and spends the weekend with his two younger sisters and his poker buddies. But yeah, it could have been better. There are some funny moments which are mostly pop culture references, like he makes a Lion King joke at one point and even does impressions of Tony Soprano and what I think is supposed to be Marge Simpson. I saw this movie after Barbenheimer, which was still stuck with me at the time, so it's clear that this was not the first movie I'd want to see after a phenomenon of two blockbuster movies released on the same day that meme culture made it seem like a UFC event. Now, at first, I had no intention of seeing this movie in theaters, but then I saw an ad for it and decided, what the hell, it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie. What's the worst that could happen? It's forgettable. I mean, it's an interesting concept. A gay couple and their adopted daughter get tied up by these four individuals, led by Dave Bautista, who tells them they have to choose which one of them dies in order to prevent the apocalypse. There's also Rupert Grint as this right-wing Trump-supporting conservative who apparently beat up one of the dads in a bar a few years ago. But yeah, this movie's forgettable. I know what you're thinking. It's a Shyamalan movie, there has to be a twist, right? Well, yes, there is a twist, but I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the movie. But if you're curious, I would recommend checking this movie out, like on a plane or something. Yes, I actually saw this movie in theaters. And I will admit, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it's not good, don't get me wrong. I just feel like they could have done more with this movie. Like, not remaking it in the first place. Yeah, I'm one of those people who believe Disney remakes since Alice in Wonderland have become mandatory and gratuitous. I mean, other than making money, of course. But at the same time, I'm also one of those it is what it is people. Like, I agree they should stop remaking older films that don't need to be remade, but I end up accepting their existence. And if you're gonna remake an animated Disney classic, I would probably adapt the original story or combine the original story with the animated Disney version. At least with Alice in Wonderland, Tim Burton made his own interpretation of the original story by Lewis Carroll, rather than being a shot-for-shot remake of the animated Disney classic. Here, this just seems lazy but with some effort. They do try to make it different by updating it for the modern era, which a lot of people seem to have problems with, and adding new songs like my personal favorite, Wild Uncharted Waters, and nobody's favorite, The Scuttlebutt, quite possibly the cringiest part of the movie. As for the performances, they're not great. Halle Bailey just sounds happier to be in this movie rather than focusing on delivering a stellar performance, and Javier Bardem isn't even trying to be intimidating as King Triton. Melissa McCarthy was quite hilarious as Ursula, but that still doesn't save this movie from its utter awfulness. Now it's time for some action. I saw this movie with my parents over Labor Day weekend because my dad wanted to see it with us. He and my mom seemed to like it, and so did I, but not as much as 10 other movies I saw this year. It's a generic action movie that if you've seen one, you've seen them all. I don't know much about the Equalizer series. I've only seen the first movie and this one, but not the second one. So Denzel Washington's character lives in Italy to settle down from his life as an assassin, but that changes when his new friends are under the control of a local crime boss, and so he has to take on the mafia. There's one scene where he threatens one of the gangsters in a restaurant, making a scene in front of everyone. He pushes him against the wall and compresses him in the median nerve. When he goes to level 3, which I assume is quite painful, he says that if he goes to level 4, the guy will shit on himself, which made my dad laugh in the theater. Also, Dakota Fanning is in this, and they did not waste her in this movie. They gave her not a lot, but the right amount of screen time to keep this movie intriguing. And that's all I have to say about The Equalizer 3. What's next? When I saw the first trailer for this movie, I thought it looked fan-made, which is not a good sign. But boy was I wrong. I thought this movie was great, and IMAX was the best theater to see it in. However, it's not my favorite movie this year, nor is it my favorite in the franchise. As you can tell from the title, this is the first half of what is supposed to be the final chapter in the series. In fact, this movie has a lot in common with Fast X, like the main antagonist using AI against our heroes, the chase scene set in Rome with the car going down the Spanish Steps, and the movie ending on a shot of a submarine. It doesn't help that I saw this and Fast X in the same theater that I have only been to for those two movies this year, which is probably why I see the similarities. So yeah, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is a fun time. And speaking of Fast X, the 10th movie in the Fast and Furious franchise. Well, actually 11th. This time, the family goes to Rome, where they try to stop Dante Reyes, who is apparently retconned into Fast 5, as he unleashes a bomb that they attempt to stop, which eventually rolls its way into the river and blows up anyway. This was part of Dante's plan, to frame the family as terrorists as a way of revenge for what they did to his father in Fast 5, and so they have to stop Dante in order to clear their names, but it's going to take 2 movies to do so. I thought this was a weird move, splitting the finale into 2 movies, which has been done many times before and after this movie. Jason Momoa's performance in this movie has to be better than in his latest Aquaman sequel. He seems to be having a ball playing the villain in a Fast and Furious movie more than the iconic superhero he's known for portraying in the same year. Also, I haven't seen the last movie, but I know that John Cena was the villain in that one, so I was confused seeing him as a good guy in this movie, but it's a franchise that loves to turn its villains into allies, so it doesn't surprise me that much. This movie is decent. Moving on. The last movie I saw this year. Even though I said Jason Momoa had a better performance in Fast X, I think we can all agree that this movie is more visually appealing. What I like about this movie is that it actually is set up from the first movie the way it should be set up. It continues the story from the first Aquaman, which is to be expected for a sequel, but it's done right, which is so rare for sequel these days. In the first movie, Aquaman had to fight his brother Orm as well as Black Manta, but Orm was the main villain in that movie. Here, Black Manta is the main villain, and Aquaman teams up with Orm to stop him. It's as if they didn't waste Black Manta in the first movie, but instead saved him for better use in the sequel. I heard a lot of people complain that Amber Heard was going to ruin this movie after Warner Brothers chose to fire Johnny Depp from Fantastic Beasts 3, but not her from this movie, and I will agree that firing Johnny Depp was disappointing, but not that disappointing because it's Fantastic Beasts 3. I wouldn't say that Amber Heard ruined Aquaman 2. In fact, I think she was given the right amount of screen time to keep me satisfied. You know what else is satisfying? A cheeseburger. Yeah, my favorite part of the movie is when Aquaman talks about how good human food is, like a cheeseburger, and Orm disagrees with that even though he hasn't tried any of it, and at the end of the movie, Orm tries a cheeseburger for the first time and enjoys it. I don't know what it is about movies that make me crave a cheeseburger, but this one wasn't too bad. Who can take a sunrise, sprinkle it with dew, cover it in chocolate and a miracle or two? The Candyman can. This movie is pretty decent. I heard a lot of people say this movie is bad, others call it weird. To that I say, it's supposed to be weird, or as Charlie Bucket put it,
Candy doesn't have to have a point. That's why it's candy.
but I wouldn't call this movie bad. In fact, I think this was one of the most enjoyable films all year. I wasn't really looking forward to seeing this movie since the first trailer dropped, but what did win me over is, no surprise, nostalgia. Not for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but instead for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I was 4 when that movie came out, and I remember going to see it in theaters. Then it came out on DVD, and I watched the hell out of that movie again and again. I still rewatch that version to this day, but now that I'm older, I probably wouldn't do the same for this version once it comes out on Blu-ray. Maybe I'll rewatch it once every few years, but that's about it. I think Timothée Chalamet's performance as Willy Wonka is just whatever. He seems to be playing the role just fine. This just feels more like Hollywood cashing in on his popularity since his breakout role in Call Me By Your Name. And speaking of performances, the rest of the cast is just brilliant. Keegan-Michael Key plays this cop who gets bribed with chocolate and just gets fatter and badder as the movie goes on. I love Rowan Atkinson, and seeing him in this movie was just a treat. He's this priest who also gets bribed with chocolate and has this secret elevator in his confession booth. And of course, let's not forget Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa. I thought this was the strangest casting choice out of the whole movie, as everyone does, but I do think his performance can be hilarious at times. Like the scene where he asks Wonka to hand him a frying pan made me laugh because I knew he was going to hit him with it. I had to pirate the movie just to watch that scene again. I've heard a lot of people complain that this casting choice was offensive because since Peter Dinklage killed the 7 dwarves in the upcoming Snow White remake, replacing them with CGI dwarves, Hollywood is afraid of offending little people, so they don't ask them if they want to play an Oompa Loompa and instead replace them with CGI, which actually takes away jobs from actors with dwarfism. And casting a non-dwarf actor is the equivalent of blackface, so the casting choice is going to be offensive either way, which I think is just stupid. Now, it's true that we're living in an era where people are afraid of offending other people, but this is ridiculous. My only problem with Hugh Grant's Oompa Loompa is that the CGI is not that great, which is a problem with most modern movies, but this one really shows. Aside from that, I think this movie is pretty delectable. Not a masterpiece, but something worth my time. This movie is not what I was expecting. I was looking forward to seeing a 2-hour escapist turn your brain off blockbuster comedy, but what I got was an 80% lecture on gender politics, which just wasn't for me. I know I'm not the target audience of this movie because I'm a guy, but I will say that it did have some clever jokes and a strange yet brilliant cast, especially Michael Cera as Alan. Also, when I heard Spice Up Your Life and Push by Matchbox 20 in this movie, I was like, both of those songs are from 1997, and so is Barbie Girl by Aqua, which didn't play in the movie for legal reasons. That must mean Barbie Land is stuck in 1997. And hey, 90s nostalgia in modern entertainment is alright with me. I wasn't even alive back then, and I feel like I know more about the 90s than any 90s kid. But yeah, Barbie is a mid movie. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it either. Hell yeah, now we're talking. Peaches, 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 peaches. I love Mario. I've played a lot of the games, mostly Mario Kart. Double Dash is my favorite, by the way. So when I heard there was going to be a movie, I was like, huh, that's interesting. Then I saw the cast announcement and was surprised to see Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. Yeah, I know Chris Pratt as Mario was considered controversial, and many felt that Charles Martinet, who is also announced to be in the movie for a cameo, should have reprised his role as Mario for the movie, and they were disappointed that he wasn't. But I get why Pratt was cast. They were clearly trying to go for a more Hollywood approach, and casting a big name actor as the iconic Italian plumber was going to make more money, and it worked. I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really funny, especially Bowser singing Peaches, which I listened to in the car after leaving the theater, and it catered to Mario fans, myself included. Apparently critics disagree, but who cares what they think? It's a shame they had to use licensed songs that have been done to death and usually don't make sense for the scenes they're in, especially Holding Out for a Hero, which was already used to perfection in Shrek 2. I also feel like it would have been better if they just kept 1 or 2 of the licensed songs. Also, I like the subtle Easter eggs, like Luigi's ringtone being the GameCube startup music, Bowser and Kamek playing the underground theme on the piano after Peaches, 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 and the film's score being Hollywood versions of the iconic themes that you hear in the games. So yeah, this is a great movie for Mario fans. Wow, the only good MCU movie of the year. I said earlier that Marvel fatigue is one of the reasons I didn't like Quantumania, but the same couldn't be said for Guardians 3. I actually had a really good time seeing this movie. The jokes were great. There's one scene where Drax is lying on a couch and they tell him to sit up, which is hilarious because Drax is just like a stubborn child who won't listen to his parents, which is something we could all relate to. The soundtrack is brilliant, including great hits from artists such as Radiohead, Space Hog, Heart, The Flaming Lips, Florence and the Machine, and my personal favorite, This Is the Day by The, which I recall first hearing in an M&M's commercial. This is the day. There's also No Sleep Till Brooklyn by the Beastie Boys, which makes this the second 2023 movie to have Chris Pratt and No Sleep Till Brooklyn, and the second movie that is a third installment of a film series set in space to have Zoe Saldana and a Beastie Boys song after Star Trek Beyond. I swear if Avatar 3 has a Beastie Boys song, I'm gonna lose it. Oh yeah, this film is also very emotional. I will admit this film almost made me cry. The scene where Rocket's friends get killed as Rocket attempts to escape from the High Evolutionary was sad, but that's not the scene I'm talking about. The scene that almost made me cry was when it seemed that Rocket was about to die and meets Lila in a white void, and it reminded me of that one scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. It's clear that even though this is a Marvel movie, it doesn't shy away from its own story rather than just being a stepping stone for the next Avengers movie or some shit. Also, the villain is great. The High Evolutionary just might be the most relatable villain I've ever seen. His plan to make the perfect species and the perfect world is something that we could all relate to. Like, a world without ignorance and bigotry is the kind of world that I would want to live in. However, this doesn't matter anymore when it's revealed the actions he had to take for his goal to be realized. He's basically the CEO of Disney, trying to fix all the wrongs of the world by making a new version of that world in order to make people forget about those wrongs. So yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was a great time. Holy shit, this is a great sequel. I was truly blown away by Into the Spider-Verse because of its animation style, which at the time was revolutionary. And it's great to see this animation style revolutionize animated films from other studios. And making a sequel to Into the Spider-Verse is a great way to keep this trend moving. So the story picks up after the events in the first movie and follows Miles Morales as he adjusts to being Spider-Man. He comes across a new foe called the Spot, who at first really sucks at being a supervillain, as he attempts to rob an ATM in a bodega. I think the Spot is a great villain, but not one of my favorites, and Jason Schwartzman was the best choice to voice him. Anyway, Miles meets Gwen again as she visits his universe, which causes Miles to want to visit other universes with her, but she tells him that in every other universe, it doesn't end well when Gwen Stacy falls for Spider-Man. So Miles sneaks off to join her, which pisses off Miguel O'Hara, who is there to make sure that the canon stays in line, and Miles getting involved will only break the canon, which Miles eventually does by saving someone that was supposed to die in their universe. I must say, the visuals and new characters make Across the Spider-Verse an improvement from Into the Spider-Verse. It's too bad they didn't bring back these characters, but the film makes up for that by giving us an Indian Spider-Man and a British punk rock Spider-Man. You know what they say, the more the merrier. But my favorite thing about this movie is its use of foreshadowing. There's a scene where Miles' mom tells him to never let anyone at those big fancy places he's going to be in tell him that he doesn't belong there. And later when Miles is fighting Miguel on top of a train, Miguel says to him,
"You don't belong here. You never did."
Obviously that's not what she meant, but still. Oh yeah, and this movie ends on a cliffhanger. Yeah, I think the twist ending is just fine. Like, it surprised me, but I knew they were going to set up Beyond the Spider-Verse, which I may or may not talk about once it comes out in 2045 or something. Mutant Mayhem just might be the best movie in the Ninja Turtles franchise. I mean, 2007's TMNT is one of my favorite movies, despite the not-so-perfect animation, because it's the only one in the franchise that I've seen the most times. But after seeing Mutant Mayhem, I think I would consider TMNT to be my second favorite in the franchise. And there are a few reasons for this. First, the animation is phenomenal, obviously, and way better than TMNT's animation. It's clear they took inspiration from Spider-Verse's animation style, making it feel more like a drawing come to life. Secondly, the story is pretty great, like the Turtles wanting to be accepted by humanity despite Master Splinter's warning to stay away from them, only to find out other mutant animals are living in New York City with the group being led by Superfly, which leads me to my third reason. Superfly is a great villain. Ice Cube really brings a comedic sense to this sinister character, who just like the Turtles, also wants to be accepted by humanity, only to reject that in favor of human genocide when he believes that he'll never be accepted. Like, his first bad experience with human interactions resulted in him murdering a guy and deciding to kill all of them and enslave the remaining ones, unlike Master Splinter's first bad experience with human interactions, which resulted in him isolating the Turtles and himself away from humans. Superfly is practically an SJW. I love it. Just as a side note, I want want to say that this is technically the second time Chris Evans appeared in an animated Ninja Turtles movie, as he is a cardboard cutout in this one and the voice of Casey Jones in TMNT. So yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is the best one in the franchise.
And now the moment you've all been waiting for. The number one pick. The best movie that I saw in theaters in 2023 is...
This is pure cinema. Quite possibly Christopher Nolan's best movie by far, even better than The Dark Knight. And I know I might sound biased because people pitted this movie against Barbie, but I think this movie deserves to win Best Picture this year. It already won Best Picture at the Golden Globes, so there's a chance it may win at the Academy Awards, unless they give it to Barbie, in which case, that's fair. So this movie is about the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer and his involvement before, during, and after the Manhattan Project. That's right, Nolan couldn't resist meddling with the concept of time in this movie. One minute you're seeing a committee he attends, and the next minute he's working on the bomb. It's just so brilliant. I also love the imagery we're shown, which were made using practical effects and not CG. Performances are excellent. Cillian Murphy was perfect as J. Robert Oppenheimer, and the supporting cast such as Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Florence Pugh, and Robert Downey Jr. were all great as well. And IMAX was the best theater to see this film, because in the scene where the bomb explodes, I was covering my ears expecting a loud kaboom, only for it to be silence followed by a delayed kaboom. This film also has the best use of shifting from being in color to being in black and white, by giving us an indication of which time the events of the film take place. Like the black and white scenes are supposed to be the present day, or the last moment of Oppenheimer's life, making the rest of the movie seem like a flashback. It might be confusing, but that's Nolan. It really shows that this movie is more than just about the Manhattan Project, but the steps he took to get there from college, and the consequences he had to face in the aftermath. All I can say is, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
And those are all the 2023 movies I saw in theaters ranked from worst to best. Sorry if I'm a bit late. I was hoping to release this video before the end of January, but this video took me forever to put together. I had to find the right clips, I was writing the script as I was editing this, and I had work, which really got in the way the most. Anyways, let me know in the comments what your favorite movie in 2023 was. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.